Super Bowl is almost upon us, and in addition to the game, there's a lot more riding on the line, perhaps even the outcome for the stock market in this coming year. Joined now by Steve Dubner. He is the co-author of the Freakonomics books and the blog of the same name. And Steve, there's already some chatter about the so-called Super Bowl indicator that if the Giants win an original NFL team, it's not going to be a good year for the stock market. Should we be rooting for the Patriots for that?
You know, I'll be honest with you, I ignore that stuff. I might as well go take some hen's teeth and cast them in the dirt. I think these indicators that we look for and kind of back test, I think we know that predicting the future based on an independent variable that has nothing to do with anything is probably a bad idea.
So would you say the same of would you say the same of the hemline indicator?
The hemline, you know, at least the hemline indicator has a little bit of, you could make an argument, an economic argument for that, you know. Shorter hemlines means less cloth is being, you know, manufactured and consumed, right. Yada, yada, yada. Or it means, you know, we're seeing more leg. That might have an effect.
Everybody's having a good time or something.
Sales of stockings, I don't know. But I know that, you know, indicators like this Super Bowl indicator are ones that I love to hear people chatter on about, and I
ignore them. Okay,
yeah.
so no, that's great. And I think it's wise to tell people to ignore that. You do some work with the NFL Network. You're focused on the game. Are there anything in your work, in Freakonomics work, that tells us what the outcome of the game is going to be?
Well, you know, we do a lot of work and cite a lot of other scholars who crunch a lot of numbers when it comes to football. Some of my favorites are these guys who wrote a book called Scorecasting, which is kind of a Freakonomics of sports. And they analyze everything from, you know, how big is, what's the real advantage in home field advantage, for instance. Now, what I like about this is there are all these factors that people think are legitimate, kind of like with the stock market, right? You got all these factors that people put a lot of stock in, and many of them are not legitimate. So these guys looked at home field advantage, which is real. In football, home team wins maybe 53 to 55% of the game. In soccer around the world, the advantage is really extreme. It's high 60s, 70%.
Well, you might be worried about the opposing fans coming to get you.
Well,
so, yeah.
You're on the right track here. So what's interesting is most people explain the home field advantage as thinking the participants in the game, the players, do better at home for a variety of reasons. They are eating home cooking,
and sleeping in their own bed.
Sleeping in their own beds. Right. Maybe they're having more sex or less sex. That's always been, you know, more distractions or fewer distractions. But what these guys did in analyzing data from all different sports is found that most home field advantage comes down to one thing, which is official bias, referee bias. So it turns out that even though officials are work very hard to be unbiased, that the home crowd influences them to the point where a lot of the home field advantage can be attributed to that. Now, what's interesting is obviously the Super Bowl is always played in a neutral site.
Right.
But this year, we've got an interesting case. Indianapolis, obviously the home to Peyton Manning, big brother of Eli Manning. Will some of that transfer over to him? But also, Eli Manning's Giants are playing the New England Patriots. The Patriots and the Colts
do
not best of friends.
They don't like each other. Interesting.
So the theory would go, and again, this is a narrow piece. The players are going to determine it. But the theory would go that likely we might see a little bit of a home field advantage toward the Giants, which might influence one whistle that's blown, or perhaps more interestingly, one whistle that's not blown, because officials do tend to swallow the whistle toward the end of a big game.
Interesting. So the hometown call, there's really some stats behind this. You know, your homer calls and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Especially in soccer. And you can measure it. The closer the crowd sits to the field, the stronger the advantage is, because honestly, you know.
So the refs, they have a reason to be worried, for sure, especially in some international
soccer
matches.
Whether it's that or whether it's just that refs are human and they want to be, they don't want to, you know, they
want to make people happy.
It's exactly right.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so the other big economic issue with the Super Bowl, obviously, is the advertising.
Yeah.
Billions of dollars being spent. You think actually the NFL and the networks could charge more money for the ads?
I got to tell you, it is a really interesting market. If you look at the Super Bowl ad market as a market, the first thing you notice is it's not a market. It's a weird kind of set price auction. You've got one seller every year. This year it's NBC. The Super Bowl rotates every year between NBC, CBS, and Fox. So when you're the seller, you're one seller, and you have the price from the previous year set for you by a competitor, but he's really a collaborator, and now you go out and you ask your price, and you either get it or you don't. It is a bizarre market. This year, NBC has set a record, $3.5 million for 30 seconds. They're going to take in $250 million for the game. We make the argument that, you know what, pricing in the corporate world is kind of more art than science already, and this one very much so. What would happen if they decided to auction off every ad slot? They might make double that. They might be leaving tens, hundreds of millions of dollars on the table. And what I would love to see is I would like to take the auction of the ad sales for the Super Bowl and make it its own half-hour TV
That would be a great show.
and sell ads against
Yeah,
it,
you're right.
I would watch it.
You make more, and another way to make money from that too. So before we wrap, that would suggest that a lot of the companies that are buying these ads, they're actually getting a bargain.
Well, it is so hard to say. ROI on advertising is one of the blackest black boxes there is. It's really hard to measure how effective it is, and many people have tried to do it. We try to do it. It's very hard. One thing I think is so interesting about the digital revolution is you see that the digital world is a place where you can measure clicks much more than in the old style. So you look at the New York Times, for instance, a great media company. I used to work there. They get so much less for digital advertising than for old print advertising. So the question is, was print advertising that much more effective, or is it that we can now measure better on digital and we see that advertising generally is just not worth as much? That's why we see these ad markets crater.
Interesting. And this is the first year that the Super Bowl is going to be streamed live, so that's going to add a whole new wrinkle to the advertising sales for next year.
It will indeed. And also, when you buy a $3.5 million ad, you get a big pre-life and a big afterlife now because the ads are so great that people talk about that.
And that's why we're already seeing a lot of these ads already. Like the Honda ad with Matthew Broderick has gone viral. It's a great ad, and I'm sure we'll see more before Sunday.
And during the game, you take your break on third down so you get back in time for the ads now.
Well, let's hope it's a good game. All right, Stephen, thanks very much.